should we crack on? I'm mindful it's an evening, and maybe people have spent a bit of time staring at Zoom and at screens all day. So, Noswaith, good evening. Welcome to Grow Social Capital. Another seminar. Is this our fourth, I think, so far of the week, which is Social Capital Week, which for us is something we gave a bit of a go last year for the first time, the final week of February. And it was a lot of fun, so we thought we'd do it again. We've kind of cranked it up a little bit more in terms of what's on. So my name's Russell, and as well as Andy and Matt, who you can see, we're directors of what's called a community interest company called Grow Social Capital. There's a fifth Beetle. I keep saying the maths doesn't work, but Sarah Townsend as well is another part of the team. Sarah's not really interested in football, but she beavers away behind the scenes on a lot of the technical and the digital and the website of things, because we're useless at that, which you may tell as we try to manage this Zoom presentation. I'd like to welcome Jamie Grundy, who I've known for a few years. Our paths crossed when Jamie was up in the Ronde Vaag on Communities First, and I had a Communities First role at that time. We bonded over a love of sort of similar to music, but football was part of that as well. So welcome, Jamie.
Hello. Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this tonight. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
And what we're going to be talking about is this concept of social capital. We gave a bit of a primer on Monday. We'll get the recording up there. I think that's a 7-year-old who's been getting a bit struck in the background, sorry. We gave a little bit of a primer Monday lunchtime about sort of different elements of social capital, kind of what the concept is, some of its key texts, academic proponents, and so on. And one of the things we talked about was this concept of sort of linking capital, where social capital exists almost kind of in a, most people tend to be familiar, if they are with it, with the sense that you have bonding and you have bridging social capital, groups who are very similar, groups who are and the ties and the bonds between them, and then the ties and the bonds between groups are very different, bonding and bridging respectively. But as a sort of a Venn diagram in the middle, you have this concept of linking, and it's a really interesting element to it all, because it tends to exist in large institutional cultures and environments. And I don't suppose you get much more institutional than a prison environment, albeit an open prison, which is what I'm going to invite Jamie just to explain a little bit about in terms of its distinctiveness from others. But before we do, we're going to talk about Prescoed Football Club and Jamie's book that he wrote about them, having spent a season with them in 1819, wasn't it, I think?
That's
Not
right,
1819.
yeah. 1819.
Back when Preston were good. No, season 19, and called 90 Minutes of Football. The title is taken, which I'm sure Jamie will explain, is taken from one of the players inspired that title. But do you want to help set the scene for us, both in terms of the geography? If people don't know necessarily where Prescoed is, and it's not the sort of place you necessarily sort of stumble upon, or you might, I suppose, on a sort of leisurely Sunday drive, but even so, you'd have to be really going into the Welsh Monmouthshire outback, as it were. But then also about how the book came about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Russell. Yeah, so the prison is one of 6 prisons in Wales, and it's the one which is the furthest east, right in the middle of rural Monmouthshire. So it's kind of like halfway between Usk and Cwmbran. I think it is about 7 miles down a single track lane. The first time I went there, I was convinced that I was going the wrong way, and I was basically going all the way down this long track and waiting for somewhere to see where I could turn around, until I eventually got to the prison, which was the only place to turn around, and lo and behold, there I was. It's the only open prison in Wales. So you have lots of prisons which are located in sort of city centres, which is where you go to. They're kind of like a holding prison. Then you'll go off when you've been convicted to serve your sentence in bigger prisons. So down in South Wales, that would typically be HMP Park in Bridgend. And then if you've done quite a longish sentence, or you've got sort of a white collar crime, then you may well go and serve out the last 18 months to 2 years of your sentence in an open prison. The difference between an open prison and the closed prison environments of Cardiff or Swansea or Park or Berwyn or what have you, is the fact that it doesn't look like a lot of the other prisons. It's not surrounded by high walls, barbed wires. There's not tons and tons of prison officers walking around. In fact, when you're there, the only sort of barrier between you and freedom, if you will, is a single traffic barrier which comes down. But all the people that are there, there's about 320 men at any one time in the prison. The reason that they're all there is they've been risk assessed. They're all in the last 2 years of their sentence. It's a halfway house essentially between being in prison and going and being released back into the community. So half of the men in the prison will go out and work during the week. So if you in Cardiff, you probably come across the Clinks restaurants, which is attached to HMP Cardiff. Most people think that the prisoners from Cardiff actually work in there. They don't. They all come from Prescoid. So loads of men will go out and leave during the day. About 150 men will leave during the day. They'll go and work on the farm, which is down the road from there, Kilgeary Farm. So if you've had a Muller yogurt in the last couple of weeks, the chances are that your the milk in that yogurt came from that farm. It's a big prison industry there. So I've been working there on an education program for quite a while with Cardiff Met, Cardiff Metropolitan University, where I was working at. It was an interesting place. We were meeting people who were coming out on license. Got to know the prison a little bit. It kind of reminded me a little bit of an open prison that I'd spent a bit of time in playing football back in the late 80s and early 90s up in Preston, which was a Category D open prison called HMP Kirkham. They had a football team there. I played against them a few times. Prescoid had a football team, but I didn't really know much about it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time when Sporting Heritage were looking for projects to support in Wales. And I pitched to them the suggestion of capturing a moment in time, or rather a season in time, of a prison football team, something that nobody really hears about, nobody really sees. And thankfully for me, they decided to support the project. So they gave me a little bit of funding to start the project off. I then basically had to approach the prison and say, hello, I'd like to do a piece of work on your football team. Would that be okay? And they batted me away then to the Ministry of Justice. And I went through kind of a long, laborious ethics approval process to get the research permissions, without which I wouldn't have been able to do the project. And that's basically where it started. I realized, having done a bit of research previously, that these kind of research projects, I could say to the prison, okay, these are the days and the times when I'm available. Please, can you arrange appointments for me to interview the men? And off I go, and I would have got the project done within a couple of weeks. However, I know that there was a high chance that the men either wouldn't have participated or would have told me what they thought I wanted to hear. And basically, it wouldn't have been a very good project. It would have been a bit rubbish. And I was intrigued to find out a bit more about the team. So having run quite a number of football teams and played and managed a number of football teams, I knew that the best thing to do was just basically come down and be a part of the team as much as I could. So every Tuesday afternoon, I went down there for the training, watched training, got to know the prison, got to know the players, got to know the staff. And then I turned up then every Saturday for matches. Even when matches got called off because of the rain, I'd still go down there because you still had some of the players who were coming up, finding out whether the game was on. Just being a part of the team as much as I could be. And that essentially is the beginning of the book, because then I was able to get to know the players, get to know the circumstances behind them. And that approach worked well. There's only one individual who didn't want to be a part of the project because I hadn't got to know him. But yeah, we started off from that point, and I was able to get to know the men, get to know what role football played in the role of the prison, why it was important, how it was a little bit different, and how it had that kind of linking social capital, really, Russell, that you mentioned.
Because we talk about trust being a key element of social capital. Areas that have strong levels, robust, deep reservoirs, or whatever the metaphor is, of social capital tend to be much more trusting of each other, but also across different sort of disparate groups, but also within. And that trust doesn't just happen, I guess, by nature of maybe some of the offences, some of the background some of these prisoners have had, the length of time some of them have spent inside. That it's not necessarily particularly. What's the best way of putting this? It's not necessarily a particular sort of trusting environment. I mean, I can remember you saying at the time that, a lot of prisoners tend to get by almost looking out for number one, which I guess is understandable.
Yeah, they do. They are not used to working in a team a lot of the time. Plus, they've probably done 2, 3, 4. One guy had done 14 years before I met him. They've survived by being incredibly selfish. And I totally understand that. They've got to look out for themselves. The moment they let their guard down, they're open to being used, I guess you could say, by other prisoners or by the system, or being husks of individuals coming through the system. So the ones that have got that far have really had to look out for themselves. So being a part of a team is different. Being trusting of me was interesting. They knew that I wasn't a member of staff because I wasn't wearing any uniform. I didn't have a set of keys. And even though there are not as many staff walking around, because it is an open prison, you can walk around within reason and go wherever you want. A couple of the guys didn't realise I wasn't a prisoner, which actually I took to be a research compliment. There were a couple of guys who were kind of, when they discovered that I wasn't a prisoner, they were kind of backtracking on some of the conversations that we'd had the previous couple of weeks. But they realised then that why I was there. Essentially, football was a really good, common bond. The reason why we're wearing footy shirts tonight, it's a common bond. We talk about that. It's the one thing that we've got in common. Some of the guys, maybe, I knew some of their backgrounds. I'm a working class guy, like a lot of the blokes there, and stuff like football. It's a common denominator. It's something that we can chat about and build a bit of a bridge together.
You and I did a podcast 4 years ago now, I think, that was around prison education specifically, and around that kind of learning experience within prison and the value of education to prisoners. And once they've left prison as well, of course. But one of the things that I remember us talking about, and it's always been a recurring thing, and it was when I was reading the book, and I was aware that you were preparing the book, obviously, and writing it as it was getting done, is this sense that in this very kind of highly disciplined, highly regulated, controlled environment, the sense that people can come together to do things together is almost frowned upon, because it seems a bit enterprising. It seems a bit, well, okay, there are ulterior motives to this. And I can remember us talking in that podcast about, well, how for most of us, learning is a communal exercise. You learn in a classroom, albeit maybe online, that there's other people. Hopefully this will be a learning exercise for people. It does tend to be a very communal, collective exercise, but that sense of collective can be quite sort of frowned upon, I suppose. Is that fair?
Yeah, very much so. I can't think of any other kind of collective activity that might go on in the prison beyond maybe sometimes there are very specific education programs designed to treat a form of behaviours. So, for example, at Prescoy, there's a project called the CHASE program, which is around substance misuse, and it basically trains up a cohort of men for a period of months who've all got similar offences, all to do with substance misuse convictions, and it basically trains them up as a unit to go on and become drug and alcohol support workers. But that is probably about the only time. There will be individuals there who are working on academic programs. So the Open University are a big supporter of distance learning in prisons, but you'll have a number of individuals who are following a learning program, say from the Open University. But when they sign up to that program, they get sent a Lever Arch file with all their resources in, and they might go and study in the library. They might go and study in their cell. But what they aren't doing, they're not sat in a classroom with a bunch of other people collaborating on learning exercises. They're not doing that at all.
Do you want to invite you to do a reading from the book if people haven't read it?
Sure.
I know you've prepared a couple of excerpts.
Yeah. Okay. What I've done is I've tried to look at a couple of bits and pieces. So one of the things that's why football works there, I think, is let's see if I can get this bit on here about the role of the staff there. The staff are the prison staff are, like most prison staff, are sort of perceived in a certain way, but the PEOs, the physical education officers, are treated a bit differently. I wouldn't say they're treated a bit different. There's a different dynamic there. So I tried to just pull together a little bit of a section that kind of talks about that. It starts off here with an extract from one of the PE staff there, Mr. Harrison, who's probably been there one of the longest. We see ourselves as mentors more than anything. Though we are prison officers, not civvies, we've all worked on the wings. We've seen the other side of life. where you were dealing with people in a non-conforming environment, where prisoners just see the black and white shirt. The PE staff are all on the same wavelength and have been in the job a long time. We are strong characters, you have to be. Here we offer something the prisoners want, whether it's football or the gym, so they won't bite the hand that feeds them. The PE office is a regular haunt of some players. If they are not working off camp, men will come in for a chat under the auspices of Saturday's league game, but conversations regularly steer towards life beyond Prescoid, family, employment, going straight. PEO, Mr. Moore, acknowledges the role they play in the prisoners' lives. Some of the boys have had a hard time at home from their partners because they are serving a sentence too. While their boyfriend or husband or kid's dad is in here, away from it all, they are the ones having to look after the kids, do the school run, pay the bills. It's hard. The men come in here and talk things through with us. I've had the biggest men, the ones you wouldn't expect, in tears right here in this office. Some of them, I've grown up in the same circumstances to them, but where I've taken one path, they've taken another. We teach them life skills, how not to react, how to walk away, how to cope. So the senior prison hierarchy, football may be seen as an engagement tool upon which to hang rehabilitative behaviours, such as anger management and etiquette, which it does successfully. With the players and the ball boys, football may be a way to enjoy a couple of hours off camp and a way to keep fit. To the new arrivals, it is the opportunity to adapt to open conditions and meet new people. To those on long sentences, it is a bit of normality, the opportunity to reset themselves back to how things were when they were younger, before they went to prison. To the PEOs, it's an opportunity to have a potentially long-lasting impact on those both at training and on match days. Through the mentoring-like approach, the skills learnt and honed on the pitch replicate those learnt and honed in the open prison environment. So yeah, I just thought I'd pick that a bit there because there's a real difference between how the PE staff are perceived and the relationships that they have with the footballers. And I think, as Mr. Moore talks about there, you know, he's come from a very similar background to some of the guys, particularly John, who's the captain. I just thought it was an interesting point there. You know, you've got guys from similar paths, but some people go one way, some people go another direction. So I thought it was important just to mention that there.
In respect of just the practicalities of the team, to what extent, because you've referred obviously to the players and to the staff there as well, who organises it, who runs it, who's putting the nets up on the goals, and who's cutting the oranges and all that kind of paraphernalia?
Well, I guess all the kind of administration of the club is done by the staff themselves. But in terms of getting the kind of nuts and bolts done that you need to have to get that team on the pitch on a Saturday, that's all done by the players. So you'll have, for example, in the gym or in the library or in the induction unit, you'll have orderlies. They're prisoners who've got a sort of a status, and essentially they're doing a job. For less than the minimum wage, but they're doing a job. And similarly, you have people who take responsibility for the football club. So you'll have people who'll turn up early to pump up the footballs, to fill up the water bottles. They'll have people who'll get the kit washed, and get it all ready for everyone. Take a bit of pride behind it. Back in the day, you also had orderlies that were working with the ground staff before that was put out to a private contractor. And you'd have people working alongside an in-house groundsman team, if you will, who would be, they'd be, keeping the place looking nice and green and tidy, but they'd also be looking after the pitch. But essentially, the team's a collective effort. Some of the senior players will sit down with the PEOs and talk about the team on a Saturday and about, who they think is ready for it. They'll also talk about maybe people that they know that are coming into the prison. There's almost like a strange informal scouting network where people know if there's a half decent player who's over in Swansea who might be up for DCAT soon, which is what they call category D prisoner status. They might know that guy's coming up for DCAT soon, and they'll be encouraging him to apply for it so they can get him to come in and, and start playing for the team. So it's a scouting network, but not necessarily as a normal football agent might know it.
Jamie, remind me, within the book, there was quite a bit about the facilities and the pitch and the whole broader well-being. Oh my God, I've never seen such a pitch.
Yeah, yeah.
That sort of came out at me as well, you know, in a much broader sort of, my God, we're lucky to have this facility. It's state of the art.
Yeah, definitely. I think football works there for a number of different reasons. It's not only about the relationship with the prison officers, you know, the PEOs. One of the things why it works is because it's a fantastic pitch, but it's the location, I think, of the pitch is why it works. Because when you're in the prison, like most of South Wales, it's on it's on the side of a hill. When you're in the prison, you can't see the pitch. It's right at the other end of a small pine forest. So to get to the pitch, you're in the changing room at the bottom of the camp. You follow a little path, and you all go down together, and you make that walk through the pine forest. And like most pine forests, it's quite dense at the top, and nothing grows underneath. So it's quite Spartan as you go through, but it is quite dark. And then when you come out to the pitch, you are, you know, the effects. I think I described it as being very similar to sort of like, you know, walking out of like a football tunnel, a bit like Wembley Way, a bit like the tunnel at Wembley or whatever, you know, or Deepdale. It's very much about as you walk through, and suddenly you've gone through the dark and your eyes have adjusted, and then suddenly you come out into the light, and what you're faced with is one pitch in front of you, which is okay, but surrounding you is, like, you know, beautiful Monmouthshire hillsides and
the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, the Garden of Eden, you know, and then you've got another beautiful pitch to the side of you. But for those men who have been in prison for a number of years, that's the first time they've seen a bit of scenery like that for years and years and years. So one of the guys, I think it was 12 years he'd done inside, and I was aware that he was going to be, you know, have his mind blown. So I was intrigued to see what that response would be. So I did that walk with him, and I knew what was coming, and it was really interesting to see the effect on him. It was phenomenal, you know. He was really taken aback by it because he's not seen a view like that for 12 years. You know, he's been inside. The only time he's seen anything beyond the walls is when he's been shipped from different prisons, and because he was a life sentence prisoner, you know, he'd be shipped around a lot. That often happens. So for him to come out into that pitch, you know, a fantastic pitch that is, you know, definitely the best one in that league. Certainly, it's a real it's a real eye opener, you know, a metaphorical eye opener for them, and it's one of the reasons why it works really, really well.
Remind me, did you say that private contractors looking after that pitch, or the prisoners themselves?
It used to be an in-house sort of ground staff team, but now it's been like a lot of sort of services, it's kind of been contracted out, and you have a grounds company who've got the contract, and they'll come and do, you know, cut the grass and weed the flower beds around, and part of that also is to keep the pitch trim and nice and neat. It's still a pretty good pitch, but it's nowhere near as good as it used to be back when the Wales team trained on it as
yeah. I was just wondering whether that was part of the if you like, the skills offer to the prisoners, or
yeah, sadly no longer. Actually, no, they're not able to. It did used to be back in the day, but now the jobs opportunities that are available to them are working on the farm 5-minute drive away, going off to work for you know, sort of mechanics or builders. When Llanfrecvre Hospital was being built, a lot of the guys were shipped up there doing things like dry lining, labouring, that kind of stuff.
Andy, you had a question, I think.
I'm mute. I was mute for a change. I mean, it must have been a very profound experience for you in terms of completely like different environment and so on. So, what effect did it have on you in that, doing the research, being there in that community, and writing the book, talking to the people? What sort of mark did it leave on you?
Well, it did leave an indelible mark. You know, I've got involved with the team since. You know, I knew what prisons were like, and I knew what prison football was like because I used to play against teams like that. You know, late 80s, early 90s, up in Preston, I used to play against 2 prison teams, so I knew what it was like. One of the aims of the book, it was that I wanted the guys' stories, I wanted their voices to be heard themselves. I wanted their sort of not quite their accents to come through, but I really wanted to write it as they spoke to me, kind of like, you know, warts and alls. So I really wanted to hear their words. So, you know, even now when I pick it up and I do readings like this, I can hear each of those individuals, their accents in my head, exactly how they speak. You know, their little stories have stayed with me. And I think one of the things that I noted from it was the similarity between a lot of them as well. When you look at some of their backgrounds, you know, it might be where they've been brought up. It might be the fact that they were brought up, you know, maybe without a dad around, you know, without those like strong male role models around. Dropped out of school at an early age. Most of the guys in the book have got some kind of learning support need, things like dyslexia, you know, hanging around with the wrong kinds of people, like having, you know, a bit of cash like we all do, but, you know, weren't able to get a job, and so turn to simple things sometimes to make a bit of cash, and that's why you find themselves there. But I think for some of them, when I got to know their stories, it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, you dissect aspects of their personality, but when you put all those things together, the picture you get is a guy in prison. But, you know, I've kept in contact with a few of them. I speak to them, you know, quite a bit. You know, probably on a monthly basis, I'll get a phone call from, there's probably about half a dozen of them that I keep in contact. I'll get messages from them asking me how I'm doing. They'll give me a shout about different things. Met up with them for a cup of coffee out on the outside and stuff. Played football with a few of them since. So yeah, it was definitely definitely an experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and like I say, I've got involved with the club afterwards when they've asked for my help. I've got involved and supported them since then. And when lockdown eases, I intend to be going down there most Saturdays, watching games as well.
I think because there was the campaign to get league acceptance, wasn't there?
Yeah. They reached out to me for support because they were they had missed the deadline to register for the league a couple of seasons ago, and they were advised, okay, you know, there was a new regime in the prison, and new sort of person who's responsible for the administration of the club missed the deadline to register the team because the FAW introduced a new registration process which caused all kinds of problems. So they didn't register in time, so they were told to apply for the following year. The following year they applied, and they were not accepted into the league. There was I don't know. There were plans afoot, shall we say, to not let them in. So a couple of the staff reached out to me and said, "Look, we're civil servants. We can't get involved in sort of raising awareness or, you know, representations, because officially we have to sort of take a fairly neutral position. Is there anything that you can do?" Yeah, I did. I went a bit crazy and set up a big campaign. And basically, I knew from all the talks I'd done before, and messages that I had on social media, I knew there was a lot of support for this entity, this thing of the only prisoner football team in Wales, and I knew that it was important to maintain it, not to discard it. So by running the campaign online, I knew that I would be able to sort of aggregate that support and get it together and quantify it in such a way that I hoped it would be difficult for the views to be ignored. And that played a part, along with the prison's own representation to the league. That played, you know, a part of getting them accepted back into the league. And then sadly, coronavirus had several more waves. But hopefully, you know, I think next season the league will start up, and I think they'll be back in then.
How has COVID sort of impacted on the recreation and exercise regime within the prison, as far as you're aware?
Yeah, well, basically there isn't any. There's none. You know, there was a little bit of recreational stuff going on, but when the second lockdown happened, prisons locked down far more than probably anywhere else. So there was a time when football was allowed. Well, the league were permitting friendlies between clubs with a view to the league starting up again. but because all the games are played by the prison inside the prison itself, they need people to be able to come into the prison as visitors. Prisons weren't allowing any external visitors, family, friends weren't allowed at all. So no team was able to come in and have a recreational fixture. But I think that'll change. I think, there's enough time, I think, now between vaccinations being rolled out, recreational sport being announced, and then a potential start date for the league. I think they'll be all right for next season.
Because it struck me that the gym was very popular in terms of a routine, a purpose, a structure. I don't know whether that was off limits as well.
I believe it was. Yeah, I believe there was no gym activities. I think there was a few kind of well-being things, but essentially, guys were being encouraged to stay in their units. Prescoy is a bit funny, really. It's not like the normal cells. It's more kind of like shared accommodation, almost like a sort of a poor man's hall of residence. So you've got small units. So they were being encouraged just to stay in those units as much as they could. But yeah, all the recreational stuff that previously went on, there would be circuits, badminton, bit of tennis, gym, stuff like that. It basically stopped for a bit.
Yeah, the power of sport and recreation.
Yeah. So I'll read another little section if you want. What I'll do is I will read a section. This is one of the guys, John. Now, John was the captain there, and I think it just shows a little bit of difference then between the way that he is perceived. He's not like a normal prisoner, and I think the different kind of relationships that he had. He's what would you say about him? He's not shy of a bit of confidence about himself. So there we are. Hope this might come across. We'll see. So this is John. The boys here know I'm a half decent player. My role in the prison is like a mentor. I support people through the OMU, which is the Offender Management Unit. Banking applications, housing applications, general queries. How do I do this or that? People might ask you to write a letter for them. So I've just got to make myself approachable at all times, whether it's a football pitch or normal life, because of what I'm doing on camp. I think that's why I'm captain, and I'm recognised by staff because I've sort of got the respect of the officers to a certain degree. I was captain on the out too, so I'm used to being captain. Not everyone in the team is from the same background. Some are from England, some are from Wales, different offences too. Some in for stuff we might not agree with, but on the pitch, everyone is friends. There's a lot of individuals, I would say, so sometimes it's not quite a team. There are 6 or 7 who have the team ethic, then 2 or 3 who are more for themselves. The PEO staff here are older, and they are the go-to people for us, a bit like a father figure. You'd never see them get disrespected in the same way that other staff might get it sometimes. They are fairer because they are on our level and non-judgmental. They are always polite and respectful to me, and I've never had an issue with them. They understand certain things people may have done for whichever reasons, though they can't condone it, and this helps them to relate to people here. I know some of them have been in the army. Some people don't believe how similar other people can be. We're all human. And I think that one, you had John there. It was his second time at Prescoy. It was his second prison sentence. He had a bit of sort of gravity about himself. He played to a pretty high standard, though he hadn't played the highest. One of the guys there was an ex-professional when I was there, whereas John had played sort of semi-pro, but he played to a good standard. And when you got to know his background, you lose to it there. I think that he looked upon the senior staff as sort of like father figures. So he himself brought up without a father around, and his sort of role model was his elder brother, who also went inside, a really good promising footballer, but also went inside. So he latched on to that kind of like pseudo father figure there that you had with the staff, and it really felt like he really sort of like gravitated towards that. And you would have some really deep conversations with the guys. Like I say, we generally go up there talking about the game, but actually we'll be talking about some of the problems that he was facing back at home. So there's a question there for Matt. What's the impact on people's future prospects for the group that's gone through the football team? Well, John, for example, he's now working for Cardiff Council as a careers advisor. So he's doing that, and he's also a part-time student at University of South Wales. One of the interesting positive effects of the pandemic is that universities have had to consider students that maybe I know that they wouldn't have considered before. So I'm a director of a social enterprise, Inside Out Support Wales. We support guys with convictions, men and women, who want to go into self-employment, but also want to go into education. And I supported John's application to go to USW the previous year. They, when Kim pushed to shove, they didn't want to take the risk on him. Roll it forward 12 months. He's now a second year student on a degree course at USW, studying one of their sports courses there. He's not the only one. The year before I was there was a former life sentence prisoner who I'd again tried to get into a university, been unsuccessful. Following year from the pandemic, he applied again. He's a former life sentence prisoner, and he got into university this time. So that's not the norm. So I think what the football does, I think it shows that they've engaged in what they call purposeful behaviours inside a prison. Essentially, it's activities that are designed to show that they are not the person that they were when they first committed their crimes and when they're locked up. Engaging with the education programs, engaging with rehabilitation programs, engaging with sports, building relationships. It's giving you all those sort of positive attributes that sport give you, and they're able to quantify that and put that to use. When it comes to applying for work, life, post prison, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless anyone has got any other questions, invite you to. Was that Andy? Yeah.
What's the next book?
Next book, I know. Well, I'm kind of halfway through writing a bit of a novel at the moment. It's subject to a lot of rewrites. I'm tempted. I've got a couple of different plans. I won't go into detail, but I've had a bit of a crap time over lockdown and stuff for various reasons. But yeah, I've got a couple of little plans. I really enjoyed spending the time getting to know these individuals. So I don't know. I'm. What's been interesting, I think, with this book is that it really was a kind of like a research project that kind of got out of hand. But one of the things I wanted to get from it was that I wanted to enjoy the journey where it took me. Christ knows I didn't enjoy the many Sundays I spent in a library, sort of writing about this. But yeah, I'm intrigued to sort of see where I go to next with this. I'm really fortunate, and I'm very grateful to do talks like this. I'm really fortunate where it's taken me. Just before lockdown happened, originally I was supposed to be in New York talking about the book to the New York Welsh Society. I paid for my own flight, admittedly, but they were keen to talk to me. That I did a podcast with them. I reached out to. There was a really good. You've probably heard of Sing Sing Prison in upstate New York. I was going to be going up there to talking to them about sport in prisons. They heard that a footballer was coming over. They have an American football team in that prison. Luckily, I told them it was soccer, not I didn't want some big sort of like, I didn't want them making me put the pads and the helmet on and then running at some big quarterback or some big linebacker. So I'm very grateful that it's taken me a long way. I've used the book, the data from the book, the interviews, have gone into sort of research documents. I'd like to do something again where I'm able to sit down, get to know people, talk to other individuals. I like that. Yeah. 18 minutes of freedom, 18 holes of freedom. That would be good, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I could go on all night. I won't do any more.
I'd like to. I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of people about doing something around the fact that you get about 40 men released a day from HMP Cardiff. The doors come open and a bunch, like a ragtag group of guys, are all released from there every day with, what was it, £47.50 in their pocket and their belongings in a black bin bag. I'd like to do something about that, and what you'll see is you get some of those guys who come straight out. The police go, "Hello, are you Roger Bassett-Jones, yes, thank you very much. You're arrested, and you're. They don't say Roger Bassett-Jones. It's just I don't want to tarnish your reputation there.
Giving away my story now, Johnny.
and then march straight back in. So you get some people who are literally out, freedom, thank you very much, handcuffed, straight back in. So I'd like to get to know some of those individuals and do something around that, around the prison churn, and see what that's like.
Has this story sort of inspired others? You know, other groups, teams throughout this disunited kingdom of ours?
Well, it's one of the things that's been good is I've gone around to a few prisons and talked about it. So me and Russ went to Berwyn up in Wrexham, where they sort of trotted me out in front of 150 blokes with the parting words of "good luck with these lot, they never sit still for anything," and they gave me sort of an hour and a half with 150 blokes in a sports show with terrible acoustics. But luckily they were pretty good, weren't they, Russ? You know, so it's inspired a lot of other prisoners to think about how they can do stuff to do with sports. I've talked in, I've been to a couple of different prisons and talked to them about how sport has helped at Prescoid. I've had loads of letters from individuals and loads of messages from prisoners on release coming out where they've read the book and asking for ideas, support, suggestions. So I think it's been a bit of a slow burn, but it's been good. I think it's inspired people on an individual basis. In terms of an institutional basis, when I played against football teams back in the late 80s and early 90s, I was playing against teams that would have come from places like HMP Park. I was playing against a couple of Category B prison teams. You probably wouldn't get that now. But we think there's only like maybe one or two other prisoner football teams across England and Wales. But hopefully this will play a small part in maybe trying to get some more together.
I think that point you made a bit earlier about the voice, I think you obviously conducted the interviews, so you could hear literally the voices of the players. But I think there's what comes through is that sense of vernacular. It is the players' words, it is the players' sort of perspective on things, and it's their phraseology, and I think that does come through, and I think that's what gives the book its power and its appeal and its authenticity. So yeah, and I think what was interesting when we went up in Berwyn, for example, was notwithstanding there was the brother of an ex-Wales football international right in the front row, and who himself was a very, very talented footballer. So that was a bit ironic, trying to tell him the power of football after 400 Welsh League appearances, whatever. But anyway, a lot of the men there wanted to just have a chat about football. It was one of those things that it's a fairly safe, then, inverted commas, kind of entry point for striking up conversation with these two guys who've just rocked up from out of nowhere and who are going to, frankly, bugger off in a bit as well and go back home, sort of thing. And that was quite fascinating, because I'd never set foot in a prison before. And I think that's again the other bit, the power of the book and the value of it is it does give an opportunity to, only a glimpse perhaps, relatively speaking, but a glimpse behind that curtain of prison life, albeit an open prison.
I know, I think my very first talk that I did it, which was at Le Pub, if you remember, Ross, when I did that one there, I got collared by a guy who came and listened to talk, and he was very complimentary of how I described it, which was very nice of him. And he told me how he'd spent time in a Russian jail, which was quite interesting, sort of. I can't remember what he mentioned now, but he looked like he'd spent time in a Russian jail as well. He was a tough guy. I was keen to buy him a drink. Yeah.
I can remember the guy. I remember him. Don't want to keep anybody sort of too late on into the evening. Really grateful for everybody's time for joining us. Hope people found it interesting. I'll give you the last word. There's a couple of plugs on the screen. Hopefully people can still see those. And I'll drop the Amazon link in, because it's not an easy link to copy down.
Yeah.
Quick plug for the social enterprise. You did mention it in Sell Out Support Wales.
Yeah, we're a new social enterprise. I keep saying that now. We've been going like about 2.5 years. But yeah, we support guys who've got convictions who want to go self-employed. Half the men surveyed in prisons want to work for themselves, and yet self-employment isn't really part of the sort of the strategic driver for when people come out of prison. Don't have to be a genius why people want to work for themselves when they get out of prison. No DBS checks, no HR departments to deal with. Plus, a lot of the guys get trained up when they're inside. Prison industries is a pretty big deal. There's a fantastic bicycle repair shop inside HMP Cardiff, for example, and all those bikes that you might trade in at Evans's Cycles to get a brand new bike for your kids for Christmas, they get taken into HMP Cardiff and get renovated and then sold off to different places. So, you know, people can learn a lot of skills. So that's what we do there. My email address is at the bottom. You know, feel free to drop me a line about anything. I'm always happy to chat. Similarly, if you're involved with any community organisations and you're looking for someone who can, you know, come along and talk, I'm always happy to do that. I've done plenty of talks for different organisations. So yeah, happy to do that. Yeah.
Do you want to read one last excerpt then?
Yeah, go on,
the final word.
Give me the final word. Okay. Let's have a little go. Okay. Which one I did now? Here we go. Okay. Okay, this is Sam. Now, Sam was a goalkeeper. It was interesting. He was completely not like any of the other, prisoners who were in there. Were all a bit shifty and shady. He was the first sentence. Really interesting guy. Not the sort of person that you would expect to find in prison. He was a very nice guy, somebody's granddad. But he was a decent goalkeeper. He also got injured when he was there twice, and I met his wife, and she gave me an earful because she thought I was making him play football. But it's quite interesting because I think some of those relationships exist within the team as well. He worked, I think there's a bit of jargon in here. He worked in the induction unit. So the first couple of nights that you're in prison, you'll go and spend it in an induction unit, which is staffed by prisoners themselves. You know, who better to understand what prisoners are going through than fellow prisoners. Football has made a bit of a difference to me and some of the other boys in here. When they first come in, they can be like a rabbit in the headlights, just like I was too. Where I work in induction, I'll start talking about football and normal things. Sort of come in that way. As an older guy, it's helped me be accepted. The youngsters, some of them here, they can walk into a room and people know them straight away. Because I'm quieter, it took me a couple of weeks to speak to the guys and things like that. There was a little bit of a clique when I first come in. But then one of the guys left and things settled down. Then Paul started playing, who I knew from my previous prison. And he's a big voice on the team, which gives you confidence. Then I got to know some of the other lads, the younger ones like Jermaine. After a couple of weeks, he'd say, "All right, Sammy," when he saw me and things like that. When you're a quiet person like myself, knowing that they know your name is a hell of a boost in here. It gives you confidence, not only at football, but when you're coming away from football to do a job in the prison. Plus, it helps you with your time here, I think. The positivity I get, even when I'm not playing, because the guys know me now. I'm there every week on the line. It's that confidence. Whoever comes in now through inductions, the first thing I say to them is, do you play football? Any shape on you? Training is on Tuesday and we're in the league, so we play Saturdays. It's that motivation you need as a quiet guy to take that step forward. So I just think it just kind of shows that football plays all kinds of different roles in the prison. Yeah, it helps build those relationships between the staff, but also it helps people to adjust, find their feet in the prison. You know, if you're, what was he? He was like early 50s he was. First time in jail, longish sentence, completely out of his comfort zone. Football helped him find his feet and find a way to serve his sentence.
Thanks, Jamie, and yeah, thanks everybody who's come along. You mentioned hoping to get up there for games. I had the pleasure of watching them play a friendly, I think it was, wasn't it, back pre-pandemic. How straightforward is it to take in a game up there, because it is very picturesque and it's a lovely experience?
Yeah, well, you've got two ways of getting in there. You can either sort of, you know, ask nicely of the prison, or actually part of the pitch actually is a public right of way. So if you go for a ramble one day, you might take in a game. So inadvertently, but I was there a couple of times and a bunch of ramblers would be exerting their right to roam. But yeah, if people are interested in going up there next season, you know, if you're interested in going there, I'm probably going to be going up there at least every other week. So yeah, give me a shout, feel free, and I'll see if I can wangle you a pass. as they say.
I can think of a third way of getting into the team, but we won't go. We won't go there. We won't go there. Jamie, diolch fawr iawn. Thank you very, very much. This has been recorded. We will get it up on the website as soon as I know how to do that. I'll just ask Sarah. But yeah, do you want a quick shout out, Andy, for what's happening tomorrow, and Matt for Friday?
So 2 more events this week. Continuing the highest standard set here. So tomorrow lunchtime, we've got people from Extinction Rebellion who've done massive amounts of impact on the world, and yet adopt very sort of unconventional ways of communicating, engaging with people. And we're sharing some of the ideas, because we believe, we call it social capital comps. It's about communicating from the heart with emotions and relationships and shared identities. And so tomorrow we're going to be a demonstration of their assembly process in action. As I say, absolutely fascinating. I think, and it's a very participatory thing, so really would recommend that. And on Friday, we've got Sophie Howe, the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, with our first of our Tumblr school. So Tumblr is a Yiddish word, meaning someone literally means someone who gets a party going. So, and it seems to me Jamie with his football, us and our work in social capital. It's really about how do we get a party going to get a better society going there. So lots of free events to come along and share. Plus, there's also Walkspiration, where any walk can be transformed into an expedition. Download it from our website there. So, guys, really lovely to meet you all. Jamie, superb man. I'm really proud of you. And again, sorry about beating you in the playoff.
We're so right. The North will rise again. We'll have our revenge one day. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Benji. Cheers.
Take care, everyone.
Bye now.